So let's look at this post from Lindsey Graham. We're going to take a look at the video in a second, but it's Lindsey Graham says, keep the Senate red so we can keep enacting President Trump's agenda. So I'll play the clip in a second, but I do want to address what he just said there. So Senator Graham, he is the senator in South Carolina, and he's running for reelection, and he's losing touch on he needs to be helping the people in his state. That is his job, to represent his state, not to represent the president. And I think the American people are starting to wake up and say, look, we voted for you to represent us. And you're talking about the president's agenda. What about helping us? What about helping South Carolinians? And I say this because right now there was a poll that was put out just, I believe, in December. And they were talking about Lindsey Graham. They asked a question about Lindsey Graham. Would you support him in 2026? Only 14% of those people polled said that they would support Lindsey Graham. It was like 74% said that they think that we should have someone new, 72 or 74%. So the vast majority of the people that were polled said, look, we need someone new. We don't want Lindsey Graham anymore. And Lindsey Graham has been there, over 20 years. And then in that same poll, Lindsey Graham, compared to a generic Democrat, was only winning by 2 points. Lindsey Graham is an incumbent. Like I said, he's been there over 20 years, and he was only ahead by 2 points. And so there's something going on in South Carolina. Let me go ahead and play this clip and see what they have to say.
Bottom line is this: we will be in the majority with your help. That's why you go to lindseygraham.com to support the entire Republican Senate ticket. The majority is in the hands of the people, and I thank God Almighty we are following our president, Donald J. Trump. We deserve your support. Go to lindseygraham.com and make a contribution, and let's stay in the majority.
So that was a pretty quick clip, but you did see there asking for support. You need to support to keep us in power, so we can focus on helping the president. Now, I don't know about you, but I sense a little bit of desperation there. I mean, they're pretty much saying, look, it's up in the air when it comes to the Senate. Let me show you the Senate map and show you why that's really not the case. Now, Democrats can take back control of the Senate, but it's going to be very hard for them to do that. But you see Senator Scott, you see Senator Graham there saying, look, please give us money. We need to, we can't afford to lose. And they're probably right. They can't afford to lose. And if they did lose, that would be a huge victory for Democrats. And that would say a lot for where the voters are going. So if we're looking at the map, this is our current map. Okay, you have Democrats and independents at 47, Republicans at 53. Republicans have an advantage here, a huge advantage. Now, we have received some late information coming out of Alaska. Peltola is going to be running. She's a Democrat, and she has a good chance of winning. But when we're looking at our map right now, Democrats have to do a lot in order to take back control of the Senate. They have to be perfect, okay? Basically, in this situation, Democrats are going to have to keep Georgia, so that's a close race right now. That would be considered a toss-up. Ossoff is an incumbent, but this race is not going to be easy for him. They would also need to win North Carolina, which is possible. You have Roy Cooper, who's running, so it's possible for them to win North Carolina. They also need to win Maine. That's another possibility. Okay, so both North Carolina and Maine, I think those races are going to be very close. And I think Democrats have a realistic chance of winning both of those states. And then they also need to keep Michigan. Now, Michigan is open because you have a Democratic senator who's retiring. And so they have to have a good candidate. The Democrats have to have a good candidate running against the Republicans in order to win in Michigan. So they have to win those states that we just talked about. And then also, because that only puts them, Democrats and independents now at 49, Republicans at 51, they still have the majority. And then some people are thinking, okay, Alaska, now they have a shot to win Alaska. Peltola's running, so let's say that happens. Now we're looking at Democrats and independents at 50, Republicans at 50. So it's 50-50. Republicans still have control. So I'm telling you, the Republicans have a huge advantage. Even if it's 50-50, they still have the majority because a vice president comes in and breaks the tie. And so now Democrats need to win one more state. And so when you start looking at the map at this point, it's going to be hard for Democrats to flip one of these states. And so the real possibilities that we can look at right now is Ohio, we can look at Iowa, and Nebraska could be a real possibility. You have an independent there, Osborne. We don't know if he's going to caucus with the Democrats. He might not caucus with anyone. We don't know how that'll play out, but that's still a possibility. That takes a seat from Republicans, if you look at it that way. Texas, that's a possibility as well. You have Tallarico, you have Crockett. They're going to be running against each other in the primary, and then whoever wins that Democrat will challenge either Cornyn or Paxton. So you do have some possibilities. And then South Carolina, looking at some of the latest polling coming out of South Carolina, I don't know. And then listening to senators talk about, look, we need your help. You need to, go to lindseygraham.com and donate. That's telling us something. That's telling us that Lindsey Graham is not very comfortable right now. And this is early on. This is early on in the election. And so I can imagine 6 months from now, if things don't get better with our economy and this whole talk, affordability, you have the president still talking about, look, prices are going down. Prices are going down. Guess what? They're not going down. You go to the grocery store and prices are still the same or even more. Even when you look at the data, when you're looking at the CPI information, it's showing that grocery prices are continuing to rise. And so that's just not true. And when you're out there as a president and you're telling the American people, look, the prices are going down, and the American people are saying, no, they're not, guess what? They're not going to have trust in you. They're not going to have trust in people who support you, like Lindsey Graham. And so that's going to be, that can really hurt Lindsey Graham.
Grocery prices here in the United States are seeing their biggest rise in more than 3 years, with new federal data showing that the average cost of household goods was up 2.7% in December compared to the previous year. Prices overall were also up 0.3% from November. Joining us now, CNN business and politics correspondent Vanessa Yurkevich. Vanessa, walk us through this new data. What else did we learn from this latest report?
Well, Wolf, we like to look at 3 key categories to start with. That's food, energy, and shelter. This is usually what Americans are spending the most money on, the biggest share of this inflation report. What we saw was in December, food prices were up 0.7%. You had energy prices up 0.3%, and shelter, which is the biggest share of this entire report, that's paying your rent every single month, was up 0.4%. But I want to dig into the food category in particular because this is probably the most amount of spending that Americans are doing regularly at the grocery store or even eating out. Food prices did jump 0.7% in the month of December. That's the biggest jump in 3 years. However, there are some economists, Wolf, that are questioning that number just because of the data collection that we saw as it relates to the government shutdown. It's been a little wonky, but we can look certainly at the annual rate of inflation for food, up 2.4%. That may sting a little bit, but it's worth noting that it is less than the overall rate of inflation, which, as you mentioned, is 2.7%. So what are you feeling at the grocery store? Well, let's look at some of these categories here. Egg prices, look at that, have fallen more than 20%. But Wolf, they had a long way to fall. Tomatoes, prices have fallen 3%. And milk, this is something that probably Americans are buying every single week, down 1%. But look at where these prices have increased. This is the last year. We're looking at the year now. Chicken up 1.2%. And then look at these huge numbers. Coffee up nearly 20%, and beef in particular. This is because of short supply of beef. That is up more than 15%. That is the largest annual increase since June. And that makes up a lot of the share of why these food prices are rising. Now, as I mentioned, overall, 2.4% for food prices on an annual level is not terrible, but it certainly does sting for many Americans when they're more accustomed and more comfortable, Wolf, with a 2% rise in food. Of course, overall inflation, as you mentioned, 2.7%. We need to get that a little bit closer to 2%. That's the Fed target rate, where Americans seem to feel much more comfortable, Wolf.
And so the bottom line here, South Carolina, yes, it could be in play, but we can look at some of these other states like in Ohio, and I think Ohio with Sherrod Brown running, I think they have a better chance of winning there. But keep an eye on South Carolina. And this, just looking at that clip and listening to them or listening to Scott, because he was the only one really talking, but there's some desperation there. there's some desperation. And so we'll have to see how that plays out in the months to come. But I want to know what you guys think. Do you think South Carolina is safe for Lindsey Graham, or do you think he's in a situation right now where he's starting to feel some pressure and he's starting to panic a little bit in South Carolina? Let me know in the comments below. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe for more, and I'll talk to you in the next one. Bye. So that's all we have for this video. Make sure if you guys want to send me an email, you can do that, david@thetecshow.com. Like the video, subscribe for more, and check out these videos over here for some more great content. Talk to you later. Bye.